come on. Why is the Sub Mini putting out more bass than the Sub 4? Something is missing here. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and it has been a while since I touched on the topic of Sonos, so let's get right to it today. Now, there was a recent, well, not so recent, maybe about 2 updates ago, when Sonos released an update and everybody was praising the sound that was coming from the Arc Ultra when it's paired with a Sub Gen 3 or a Sub 4, and that the bass was overwhelmingly positively good. Now, that was actually a bug on Sonos' side. So what did Sonos do? They actually kind of bumped up the output from the Sub when it's connected to the Arc Ultra. So this chart here that I'm going to show you, okay, is the previous Arc response when it's connected to a Sub Gen 4. Now, you will see a noticeable bump here, and this is the bass frequency response. Now, in this frequency response sweep, what you'll see is actually what the system sounds like, the level of outputs when it goes from 20 Hz all the way to 20 kHz on the far right of this screen. Now, when you see this chart, you will notice that, wow, the Sub response is really good. The bass response that's coming out from this system is really good, but apparently that was a bug on Sonos' side. So they subsequently rolled out a patch to it, and when you patch it up, so when you go into the system and you try to update your software, which I don't actually automatically update so that I can do these kind of videos and compare the before and after. This is before the update that rolled out that corrected the bug, and in yellow you will see the frequency response that is after the Sub bug was corrected. So you are losing a lot of bass response. The green one was the previous Sub output, and the yellow one is the new Sub output that is coming after the firmware has been updated to correct the bug. Now, would that kind of Sub output be considered a bug? Because apparently a lot of people liked it. The video that I made on that had overwhelming response and everybody was singing praises of the sound output. But what Sonos thinks is that it is actually not what the filmmaker intended. The filmmaker intended for a more subdued Sub response. So after you update the software on your Sonos system, you're going to see reduced output from the Sub. Now, that is bad news, but you know what? Sonos, they do allow you to correct for that. So you have a few choices, right? You can correct the EQ, although the EQ is only 2 band for treble as well as for bass. You can also adjust the output of the Sub. Now, if you look at this output here, I have actually another rate curve which I'm pulling up. Now, this rate curve mimics the original green curve a little bit more. So what I did was I actually adjusted the Sub output. I adjusted the EQ, both the bass and the treble response. I'm going to make the changes. I'm posting it right here on the screen so that you can see the changes that I've made after I updated the software to get back the sound that the previous firmware was giving me, which all of you love. So if you are a Sub bass head and if you really like the output from the previous one and you do want to update your software, Sonos does kind of force you to update at some point in time, then this is how you can get back that original sound signature. Now, let's get this clear, right? This is by no means a best setting because I do believe that music or sound, it should be recreated as per what the filmmakers intended. So if the filmmakers intended for the bass to be at this level, it should be at this level, not elevated beyond that specific level. Now, when we hear improved bass that brings the bass version up to that high, it does feel good because, you know, you kind of like, hey, that is actually the kind of bass that I want, is a lot of bass response, right? So if you do like that, there's now a way. Just follow the settings I have. So even after you have updated the firmware, you can still get back the same sound signature. Based on my settings here, you will be able to get back the rate curve. The rate curve is still going to give you a little bit more bass output. Now, when it comes to the 20 to 30 Hz, you're still not going to get the same amount of bass output from your subwoofer as per previous implementation of the firmware, but you're going to get somewhere close. The mid-bass region, all the way up to even 300 Hz, you're going to get slightly improved bass response. Now, over at the far end, I don't think you will see it. I think, yeah, okay. Over the far end here, the response drops just a tiny little bit. Now, do I agree with what Sonos is doing here? Well, if people want more bass, let them have more bass. So this is the way you can do it, right? Just make the adjustments. Now, I did the same test on the Sub Mini too. So I do have a Sub Mini. So maybe let's take a look at the previous firmware when I was doing this on the Sub Mini. I will pull up the previous Arc Ultra with Sub 4 and the previous Arc Ultra with Sub Mini. So in green is with Sub 4, with blue line is with the Sub Mini. So you'll see that the Sub Mini actually, the output is also elevated. Of course, below about 70 Hz or so, you're still not going to get the same kind of output as the Sub 4. Now, what happened with the new firmware update? Did it also bring down the sub output from the Sub Mini? Well, let me pull out another curve. This cyan curve here, actually, if you see the cyan curve and the blue curve, it overlaps each other quite consistently. So Sonos didn't actually bring down the output from the Sub Mini with the new firmware update. Now, if I were to compare with the firmware update, and this will be the Arc Ultra with the Sub 4, all right, the yellow curve, you see that, hey, what is happening here, man? Sonos has made the Sub Mini more powerful than the Sub 4. Something is missing here. So did they apply the fix to the Sub 4 but not the Sub Mini? In which case, the Sub Mini is now outputting a lot more bass than the Arc Ultra when it is paired with a Sub 4. Now this is the inconsistency which I'm facing. I don't know whether it is a problem that Sonos has or whether it's something that they need to fix or they have not gone around to fixing, but come on, why is the Sub Mini putting out more bass than the Sub 4? Something is missing here. Granted, right, there could be slight position changes. I try to put the sub in exactly the same place when I do the testing, and the port facing might also differ slightly, and because they have a completely different form factor, rectangular versus a circular form factor, you may not exactly get the same output, but hey, it is the same room and the difference is just too big to ignore. So I do believe that if Sonos really wanted to make this whole sound signature as accurate as possible, they do have to fix the Sub Mini. But should they fix the Sub Mini? That is the question, right? Because if you do like this kind of sound output from the subs, then you don't want Sonos to fix the Sub Mini output. You want it high, right? Although the high here is centered around 80 Hz or so, so it's the upper bass kind of response that you're getting, not so much the low, deep and chest thumping bass, those that you can feel it in your guts, right? Which is exactly what the Sub 4 was doing and performing with the green curve here. That was before the update. So I like to just summarize this. Those of you with a Sub Mini, don't have to do anything. The sound output is still going to be elevated for your bass output. Those of you with the Sub 4 or the Sub Gen 3, there are a couple of things you need to do. You can choose to remain on the previous version of the firmware. That gives you the elevated green curve response, which you may like, but if you don't like that exaggerated bass response, you should update the firmware to the newer version, which will give you the yellow curve here. Now the yellow curve is a little bit more subdued. Granted, it may not be to your liking, but if you want something more accurate from your sound system, this is probably what you should do. Now, at some point in time, like I said, you do have to update your firmware, and if you do update your firmware and you want to adjust it to sound like the green curve, then follow my changes and all these settings which I'm going to put on the screen up here, and you follow that, it will give you the red curve, which will still give you the exaggerated bass response. So I hope you have found this useful. I haven't had a lot of time to spend on this channel recently, and work has been taking a toll. I've been traveling quite a lot. I'm also looking at another channel and trying to start the channel up, which is right here, if you want to take a look at what I've been up to. So if you liked the video and you found it helpful, then do leave a thumbs up, do leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you have not already done so. I do cover a lot of tech stuff, especially on Sonos. And if you're interested in the other videos I'm making, then check out some of these videos. Now, I've already connected the Sub Mini to the Arc Ultra right now, so in the next video, I will probably want to do the best settings for the Arc Ultra together with the Sub Mini, which I think I've not done that before. So stay tuned for that if you are looking out for that video.